The crystal chandeliers hanging from the banquet hall ceiling glittered like lost stars, reflecting down onto the polished wooden floor. The sound of violins mingled with bursts of laughter, creating a warm and piercing symphony, as if it could tear the air apart. Mia Anderson sat quietly at the edge of a table in a corner, where the dim light couldn't quite reach. Her hands absent-mindedly twisted the hem of a pale blue dress, borrowed from her cousin, the fragile threads seeming to tremble under the pressure of her fingers. This was the wedding of Jessica, Mia's best friend, a day meant to overflow with joy, love, and blessings. But for Mia, the moment felt like a blade sinking deep into her heart. She tried not to look toward the dance floor, but her eyes drifted there anyway. In the glittering light, Daniel was dancing. Her Daniel, or rather Daniel, who used to be hers. He was laughing the same radiant smile she had once dreamed would be hers alone. In his arms, his new fiancée twirled gracefully in a stunning white gown, her golden hair glinting beneath the lights. They looked like they had stepped out of a perfect painting, and every bow, every clasp of their hands was a cruel reminder that Mia no longer belonged in that picture. Just a few months earlier, Daniel had looked her straight in the eye and said coldly, "You're sweet, Mia, but you're too ordinary. I need someone who can stand beside me, not behind me." The word ordinary had carved itself into her mind like a scar that wouldn't heal. Mia, 26, was an African-American woman whose bright brown eyes held an untold story. Her natural curls were usually tied back in a loose bun. She rarely had the time to fuss with them. She worked at a small cafe downtown, where the long shifts stretching late into the night left her legs aching. Her life held no luxuries, no wealthy parents' trust fund or grand inheritance. All she had was her resilience and a modest dream to one day open a bakery where she could share the flavors of the cornbread her mother taught her to make the sweet peach pies that tasted of childhood. But that dream felt painfully distant in this city, where a person's worth seemed measured by designer labels and social media followers. She had tried to blend into the wedding. She carefully smoothed the borrowed dress before entering the luxurious hotel ballroom. But the truth was, she didn't belong there. The room radiated opulence, champagne glasses sparkling in guests' hands, gowns that cost more than Mia earned in a year, watches glinting under the lights. Her table was the only one with a name card that read simply, Mia Anderson. No gilded Mr. and Mrs. Like the others, just her name. Alone as always. She tried not to look at Daniel, but every laugh and kiss he gave his new fiancée was another knife twist. She remembered vividly the night he ended things, his averted eyes, his cold voice. That word ordinary had broken her heart and made her doubt herself. She lowered her head, gripping the glass of water on the table, trying to make herself smaller, as though she could disappear from the room. Around her, the crowd clapped and cheered, phones raised to capture the moment. They were living in someone else's happiness, while Mia only wanted to escape. Then suddenly the chair beside her creaked softly. The air seemed to shift, a warm current brushing past. A deep, steady voice, with a protective edge, spoke near her ear. "Pretend to be mine tonight." Mia looked up, her breath catching. The man before her looked like he had entirely stepped out of a different world. He seemed to be in his 30s, with naturally but perfectly slicked back black hair and a sharply defined jawline. His suit radiated wealth without needing a label. But what stunned Mia were his gray eyes, deep, unreadable, yet strangely resolute, as if he had already decided something she couldn't grasp. What Mia whispered, her voice trembling, nearly lost in the music. He didn't smile. He didn't waver. He reached out and touched her hand. His palm was warm, steady, as if it could hold the world together. "Trust me," he said, his voice low but persuasive. Before Mia could protest, he stood and gently guided her to her feet. Her legs trembled, but she let him lead her toward the dance floor. The crowd began to take notice, curious eyes sweeping over them. Whispers spread, and Mia felt the air shift. Daniel noticed too. He froze on the dance floor, his gaze narrowing when he saw Mia in another man's arms. As she would later learn, Ronald Wilson was tall, exuding a quiet confidence that made others instinctively give way. The music swelled, and he turned her lightly, his hand firm at her back, keeping her steady. "You're shaking," he murmured, just for her to hear. "This is crazy," Mia replied softly, unable to hide her unease. She felt his warmth, and though reason told her to pull away, her body leaned closer instead. For the first time that night, Mia was no longer invisible. She was no longer the girl sitting forgotten at the corner table. All eyes, including Daniel's, were on her now. A small but fierce spark flickered inside her. Not love, not yet, but defiance. She didn't know his name, didn't know why he had chosen her. But in that moment, she clung to his words like a lifeline. Pretend to be mine tonight. And just for tonight, she wanted to believe she was worthy. The dance floor seemed to tremble beneath Mia Anderson's feet. Or maybe it was just her racing heartbeat. The crystal lights still glittered above, but they no longer made her feel small. Ronald Wilson, the man who had pulled her into the center of attention, confidently guided her through each beat of the music, making it seem like the entire room belonged to him. His hand rested lightly at her back, steady, but never forceful, more an invitation than a command. Though still self-conscious, Mia straightened her spine, trying not to stumble literally and figuratively. "You're trying too hard not to shake," Ronald murmured, his warm baritone brushing her ear just loud enough for her to hear over the sweep of violins. Mia glanced up and met his gray eyes, deep and unreadable, like a lake at dusk. "I'm not used to being the center of attention," she answered, her tone edged, but unable to hide her curiosity. "Who drags a stranger onto the dance floor like this?" Ronald tilted his head slightly, a discreet smile touching his lips, not arrogant, but enough to unnerve her. "Maybe someone who saw you deserved better than that corner table," he said, his even voice carrying a weight that made her pause. Before she could reply, he spun her gently. The smooth motion surprised her, and she didn't stumble. Around them, murmurs rose, and curious glances swept over their figures. Mia felt the heat of those stares, but she didn't want to shrink away this time. The crowd on the floor thinned as the music ended, but Ronald didn't release her hand immediately. He led her off the center toward the bar, tucked into a corner of the room where the light was softer and the crowd's noise dulled. Mia followed, wobbling a little in the borrowed heels. Ronald noticed and slowed his pace so she could keep up a small, deliberate gesture. "You okay?" he asked, pulling out a tall stool for her at the bar. "Not precisely," Mia admitted, smoothing the hem of her dress as she sat. "I still don't understand why you did this." She looked directly at him, searching for cracks in his polished exterior. His perfectly tailored suit, his sleek black hair, the confidence that seemed instinctive. But his gaze didn't flinch. Instead, it locked on hers, as if he were reading every line of thought in her head. "Because I saw you sitting there trying to disappear," Ronald said, signaling the bartender for 2 glasses of champagne, "and I didn't want to let that happen." His words were simple, but something in them felt genuine enough to make Mia's heart stutter. She took the glass he handed her. Their fingers brushed, and she quickly drew back, as if afraid that touch might pull her into a world she wasn't ready for. "You don't know anything about me," Mia said, her voice low but steady. "Why do you care?" She sipped the champagne, its soft sweetness reminding her of childhood, when her mother baked peach pies and told stories of her grandmother's enduring love. Ronald leaned in slightly, his elbows resting on the bar, his eyes still fixed on her. He said, "I don't need to know everything about you to see you carry a story worth hearing. Mia let out a small laugh tinged with irony. My story is just night shifts and the smell of burnt coffee, she quipped, though her eyes flickered with sadness, as if the words had brushed an old wound. Ronald didn't laugh. Instead, he studied her as though searching for something more profound. You remind me of someone, he said, his voice lowering. Someone who once thought she wasn't good enough, but kept moving forward. Before Mia could ask more, a sharp, excited voice cut through. Mia. Oh my God, who are you here with, Jessica? The bride appeared in her magnificent gown, veil swaying as she moved. She hugged Mia, then turned to Ronald, her eyes widening. Wait, you're Ronald Wilson, of Wilson Enterprises. Mia frowned, glancing from Jessica to Ronald. You know him. Jessica laughed as though Mia's question were absurd. Know him, Mia. The whole city knows him, Wilson. Enterprises owns half the skyscrapers here. People line up to get a meeting with him. Mia felt her stomach tighten. She looked at Ronald, waiting for an explanation, but he merely shrugged, his smile faint, as if it were nothing at all. Don't believe every rumor, Jessica, he said, his tone easy, but his eyes still on Mia. Jessica pulled Mia aside, whispering with excitement. Do you realize how huge this is? Ronald Wilson never shows up with anyone at events like this. You've just turned the whole ballroom upside down. Mia tried to smile, but inside a wave of doubt rose. She didn't belong to the world of skyscrapers and million-dollar deals. She was just a coffee shop employee, dreaming of a small bakery filled with the scent of flour and brown sugar. When Jessica returned to the crowd, Mia turned back to Ronald. I'm not the kind of woman you usually show up with. Am I? She asked directly, her voice unsteady but unflinching. Ronald took a slow sip of champagne, his eyes turning serious. No, you're not. And that's precisely why I'm here. He set the glass down and leaned closer. Those people, they're performing. You're real. And tonight, I want real. His words silenced her. She wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand her, that she didn't belong here. But then she saw Daniel across the room, his gaze sharp and cold as it landed on her and Ronald. A small spark flared inside her, not love, but pride. She didn't need Daniel anymore, and maybe just for tonight, she could borrow strength from this mysterious man to stand tall. All right, Mia said, her voice steadier now. Tonight I'll pretend. But only tonight. Ronald smiled this time, a genuine smile lit up the corner of the room. That's enough, he said, raising his glass to her. Thank you, Mia Anderson. And as their glasses touched, Mia felt she was no longer invisible, if only for a fleeting moment. The space around the bar felt separate from the noise of the ballroom. The violins still drifted faintly, but beneath the dim glow of hanging lamps, Mia Anderson felt as if she could finally breathe for the first time all evening. The champagne glass in her hand sparkled, reflecting light, like shards of broken memories she tried so hard to bury. Across from her, Ronald Wilson leaned an elbow on the bar, his gaze locked on her without wavering. His presence was comforting and unsettling, as though he could see into the hidden corners she never let anyone touch. Ronald said, "You don't have to pretend with me." His deep, steady voice inviting her to lower the walls she had built. Mia took another sip of champagne, the soft sweetness reminding her of summer afternoons with her mother, when they baked and laughed together in their tiny kitchen. "I'm not pretending," she replied, though her voice wavered as if she wasn't entirely sure. "It's just, I'm not used to this kind of attention." Ronald tilted his head slightly, a strand of black hair falling across his forehead, softening the perfection of his appearance. "Then you should get used to it," he said with a faint smile, "because you're not someone easily forgotten." His words sent her heart racing, but she quickly looked away, letting her eyes wander back to the crowded dance floor. She didn't want him to see her falter, didn't want to feel that dangerous vulnerability. Mia said you talk as if you've known me forever, her tone laced with sarcasm to cover her curiosity. But we've only met less than an hour ago. Ronald chuckled, the low sound unexpectedly soothing. Sometimes a moment is enough to know someone is worth staying for, he replied before sipping his champagne. His eyes seemed distant for a flicker, as though recalling something out of reach. Mia wanted to ask more, but then a figure appeared, making her freeze. Daniel, her ex, strode over from the dance floor, his eyes sharp with disapproval, as if she had committed some unforgivable sin. He stopped a few steps away, his arm around his fiancée, but his gaze fixed only on Mia. "What are you doing, Mia?" Daniel demanded, his voice tinged with anger, as though she had no right to stand here or be seen. Mia's throat tightened. A part of her wanted to shrink back, like she always had when Daniel spoke words that made her feel small. But then she realized Ronald was still there, calm, steady, watching with a quiet protectiveness that anchored her. "There's nothing left to say." "Daniel," she answered, her voice trembling, but laced with a new firmness. "You've changed fast," Daniel sneered, his eyes flicking toward Ronald. "Or is it thanks to your new friend here?" Ronald didn't react immediately. He slowly set down his champagne glass, then looked Daniel square in the eye. "She doesn't need me to shine," he said evenly, his voice sharp as a blade. "She may need someone to remind her she doesn't have to live in someone else's shadow." Daniel stiffened, his jaw tightening. Without another word, he turned and walked away, dragging his fiancée with him. Mia exhaled, as if she had just weathered a storm. She turned to Ronald, her eyes filled with questions. "Why did you do that?" she asked softly, her voice steady despite her unease. "You didn't have to stand up to him for me." Ronald shrugged, that light smile returning to his lips. "I didn't do it for him. I did it for you." The simplicity of his words struck her, opening something inside her she didn't realize had been locked away. They lingered at the bar, the space between them growing more comfortable. Mia spoke of her cafe job, early lattes in the early mornings, and wiping tables at late nights. She shared her dream of opening a bakery one day, where she could bake cornbread soft as memory and peach pies fragrant with childhood. Ronald listened without interruption, his eyes brightening as she spoke about recipes she had tried. "Have you ever baked one yet?" he asked, his tone curious. Mia smiled, truly smiled for the first time that night. "Hundreds of times. But I still haven't found the perfect recipe for my mother's peach pie." Ronald leaned closer as though sharing a secret. "I tried baking once," he admitted with a self-deprecating grin. "The result was a smoke-filled oven and a tray of charred disaster." Mia laughed, the image of a man like Ronald wrestling with flour, making him feel suddenly more human. The evening slipped by, and Ronald never left her side. He introduced her to a few other guests, names that carried weight in the city, but he did it naturally, as if she were his equal. For the first time all night, Mia realized she didn't feel like an outsider anymore. When the party wound down, Ronald offered to walk her home. "That's not necessary," Mia said, hugging the borrowed coat tighter around her shoulders. "I can walk." "I know you can," Ronald replied gently but firmly. "But let me come with you." They stepped out of the hotel into the cool night air. Passing a small glowing bookshop, Mia paused, her gaze drifting to the colorful spines in the window. "I love this place," she said softly. "Books are where I escape everything." Ronald's expression softened. "I used to be the same," he said. "Whenever the weight got too heavy, I'd find a book to forget for a while." Mia looked at him in surprise, not expecting someone like him to admit that. "What were you escaping from?" she asked. Ronald was quiet momentarily, his gaze turning outward, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Pressure," he said finally. "When the world thinks you have everything, you feel empty inside." His words left Mia speechless. She realized then that though they came from different worlds, both carried unseen scars. They continued walking, Mia's footsteps tapping steadily against the pavement. Beneath the street lamps, she felt a fragile but undeniable connection. "Thank you, Ronald," she said quietly but sincerely, for making tonight different. Ronald smiled, his eyes warm. "Thank you, Mia, for giving me a reason to stay." They stood there bathed in golden lamplight, and for that moment, Mia felt she was not just a cafe worker with small dreams. She was Mia Anderson, a woman beginning to believe she deserved to be seen. The party was over, yet the golden glow of the street lamps still lingered in Mia Anderson's mind as she walked beside Ronald Wilson. The night air was cool, carrying the faint fragrance of roses from a small flower shop at the corner. Her borrowed heels tapped a steady rhythm against the pavement, blending with Ronald's confident stride. She clutched the cousin's coat tighter around her shoulders for warmth. But deep inside, a tiny flame burned. Not love, but a new flicker of pride. Ronald didn't press her to speak. He walked at her side, hands in the pockets of his suit jacket, his eyes occasionally drifting toward her, as though to make sure she was all right. "You don't have to walk the whole way," he said lightly, his tone edged with playfulness. "My car's parked right over there." Mia shook her head, offering a small smile. "I like walking. It helps me think." Ronald nodded without argument, and they continued in silence, the kind of silence that felt comfortable, not heavy. They passed a small bakery, its windows glowing softly, trays of tarts and cookies neatly displayed inside. Mia stopped, her eyes lighting up at the sight of lemon tarts and butter biscuits. She admitted, "That I used to dream of having a place like this," her voice tender, as if sharing a secret. "A little bakery where I could make the things my mother used to bake: cornbread, peach pies, the flavors that feel like home." Ronald leaned closer, peering through the glass. "Sounds like a place worth visiting," he said. "What's the first thing you'd do if you opened it?" The question startled her. She rarely let herself think that far ahead, too often trapped in the cycle of rent bills and long night shifts. "I'd hang a picture of my mother," she said softly. "She taught me everything about baking. Every recipe is a story, you know." Ronald nodded, his gaze gentling. "I understand. My father used to tell stories too, through the little model ships he built inside glass bottles." Mia turned toward him, curiosity sparking. "Your father," Ronald smiled, though there was a trace of sadness in it. "He was a craftsman before the family company became what it is now. He always said the little things are what keep us grounded." Mia fell quiet, sensing another layer of him unfolding. He wasn't just the powerful man tied to skyscrapers and wealth. He carried simple memories much like her. They walked on until they reached a small park. Ronald pointed to a wooden bench beneath the lamplight. "Rest a bit." Mia nodded and sat, the chill of the woods seeping through her borrowed dress. Ronald took a seat beside her, leaving just enough space for comfort. He said, "You're not like the people I usually meet," his voice low. "They're always trying to be someone else. But you're just yourself." Mia gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Myself? I'm just a cafe girl, trying not to spill coffee on customers." Ronald shook his head, his gaze intent. "You're someone who dares to dream, Mia. Not everyone can do that." His words silenced her. She wasn't used to being seen that way, to having someone recognize value in the things she had always thought were small. Suddenly, a figure hurried toward them. Jessica, the bride, appeared, her veil swaying as she ran. "Mia, I've been looking everywhere for you," she exclaimed, then turned to Ronald, her eyes sparkling. "And you, Ronald Wilson? You've set this whole wedding buzzing." Mia frowned. "Buzzing about what?" Jessica laughed, tugging Mia to her feet. "Didn't you see everyone's faces when you two danced?" They're all wondering who you are and why Ronald Wilson chose you. Mia felt her cheeks flush. She glanced at Ronald, but he only shrugged as though gossip didn't matter. They can wonder all they want, he said evenly. I know what I'm doing. Jessica clapped her hands, delighted. Mia, you have to enjoy this moment. You looked radiant tonight, truly. She shot Ronald a playful wink. And don't you dare let her walk home alone. When Jessica returned to the crowd, Mia turned to Ronald. She said quietly but firmly that I don't want to be the subject of gossip. Ronald's eyes softened. They talk because they don't understand you. But I want to. He rose, offering his hand. Shall we keep walking? Or do you want to go back to the lights? Mia shook her head, smiling faintly. Let's keep walking. I'm not ready to return to that spotlight. They left the park, strolling through streets strung with lights. Ronald told her about the time he tried to bake something for his father, ending in a tray of charred failure that filled the house with smoke and laughter. Mia laughed at the image, picturing him in a chaotic kitchen, so far removed from the powerful man she saw. I never imagined you doing something like that, she teased. Ronald shrugged. I have more imperfect days than you'd think, Mia. As they neared her neighborhood, she stopped in front of an old apartment building with peeling paint. I live here, she said, pointing to the structure. Ronald looked up, no trace of judgment in his eyes. Thank you for tonight, he said sincerely. I haven't laughed this much in a long time. Mia smiled, warmth blooming inside her. Thank you, Ronald, for making me feel enough. He nodded, not pressing her to say more. Good night, Mia, he said, before turning away, his figure melting into the streetlights. When Mia entered her small apartment, she glanced into the mirror and saw her eyes shining brighter than usual. Tonight, she wasn't just the cafe girl. She was Mia Anderson, the woman who dared to step out of the corner, carrying within her the seed of confidence beginning to grow. The days after the wedding passed like a hazy dream in Mia Anderson's mind. She returned to her daily rhythm, early morning shifts at the cafe, the sharp aroma of roasted beans in her nose, the clink of porcelain cups as she cleaned. Yet something had changed. Each time she looked in the mirror, she caught a new glimmer in her eyes, as if that night of dancing with Ronald Wilson had planted a small seed of confidence inside her. Still, she told herself it was only an exception, a fleeting light bound to fade. Then one evening, as Mia rearranged the pastry shelf at the cafe, her phone buzzed. A message from Ronald. Are you free? Saturday night? I want to invite you to the Harbor Foundation Charity Gala. Mia froze, staring at the screen. A charity gala. She had heard Jessica mention it, an event where politicians, celebrities, and CEOs gathered in dazzling attire, where a ticket alone cost a month of her salary. She typed back, I don't think I belong there. Ronald replied almost instantly, You belong more than you think. I'll pick you up at 7. She wanted to refuse, but something in his words, less command than faith, unsettled her resolve. When Jessica called right after, her friend's voice rang with excitement. Mia, you have to go. It's the biggest event of the year. And Ronald Wilson is taking you. You'll be the center of attention. Mia gave a weak laugh, her stomach twisting. Center of attention, or the punchline. Jessica laughed. Trust me, you'll shine. On the night of the gala, Mia stood before the mirror in her small apartment, wearing a black gown borrowed from Jessica. The dress hugged her frame, its hem sweeping the floor, elegant but foreign to her skin. Her curls were loose, catching the dim apartment light in soft waves. She smoothed the fabric, trying to quiet the feeling that she was pretending to be someone else. When the doorbell rang, she drew a deep breath and opened the door. Ronald stood in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo with sleek yet slightly unruly hair. His gaze traveled over her slowly, not ostentatious, but enough to make her heart race. He said, "You're more beautiful than I imagined," and his deep voice was sincere. Mia flushed, murmuring, "Thank you, but I still feel like I'm playing a part." Ronald smiled, extending his hand. "Then play the leading role tonight." The gala venue was another world so lavish it stole Mia's breath. Giant crystal chandeliers hung from the soaring ceiling, their light glittering across the marble floor. Servers swept past with trays of champagne, while guests shimmered in sequined gowns and tailored suits. Camera flashes sparked at the entrance, and Mia felt the weight of every step as she clutched Ronald's arm. Curious eyes swept over her, whispers trailing, "Who is she?" Not the usual kind with Wilson. Their table looked like a work of art, with silver cutlery and crisp white silk napkins. Mia sat, hands trembling slightly, as she lifted her glass of water. Ronald spoke easily with those around them, but his gaze often flicked back to her, anchoring her presence. An older woman with diamond earrings leaned toward Mia. "What do you do, young lady?" she asked, her sweet tone carrying a sharp edge. "I work at a cafe," Mia answered, steadying her voice. A soft ripple of laughter spread from a few around the table, not loud, but enough to make her cheeks burn. "A cafe, how?" "Quaint," the woman said, lips curling in an ambiguous smile. Ronald set down his knife, his voice slicing through the moment. "Her work requires dedication and sincerity, qualities not everyone here can claim." The table fell silent, and Mia felt his gaze like an invisible shield, protective, but not suffocating. Yet the whispers didn't stop. When she rose to refill her glass, she overheard a group murmuring in a corner. "She doesn't fit him, does she?" one woman whispered. "It's a passing amusement. Wilson always picks women like that, then tires quickly." The words struck like a knife. Mia froze, her hand tightening around the glass, the room closing. She didn't belong here, and they knew it. She slipped away to a quiet hallway, trying to breathe. Ronald noticed her absence. Minutes later, he found her concern shadowing his face. "Mia, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. She shook her head, fighting back tears. "I don't belong here, Ronald. They look at me like I'm a mistake. I don't want to be your joke or anyone's." Ronald stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "You're not a joke," he said firmly. "They say those things because they don't know you. But I do. I see how strong you are, even when you don't." Mia searched his eyes for any trace of deceit, but found only sincerity. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "To prove something." Ronald was silent for a beat, his gaze flickering with rare hesitation. "Because I wanted you to see part of my world," he said, "and because I wanted to be with you, even if only for a night like this." His words made her heart pound and stirred a wave of doubt. She turned toward the windows where the city lights shimmered. "I need time, Ronald," she said softly but firmly. "I need to know who I am before I can step into your world." Ronald nodded, no argument in his voice. "I understand," he said quietly. "But remember this, Mia. You never have to be anyone but yourself." He draped his jacket over her shoulders, then stepped back, giving her space. When Mia left the gala, the night air was sharp and cold. Yet inside her, one burning question remained. Did she have the courage to face herself? The icy night air wrapped around Mia Anderson as she stepped out of the glittering Harbor Foundation gala. The music and laughter from the ballroom still echoed in her head, but now they were nothing more than distant sounds, drowned out by her heart pounding. The black dress borrowed from Jessica suddenly felt unbearably heavy, dragging her down and reminding her she didn't belong in the world of flashing cameras and judgmental whispers. She hurried down the marble steps, fighting back the tears threatening to spill. Mia Ronald Wilson's voice rang out behind her, firm, but not harsh, carrying an urgency that made her pause. She turned, seeing him at the top of the stairs, the building's light casting his tall frame in sharp relief. His tuxedo was still flawless, but his eyes betrayed worry. "What happened?" he asked, as he descended, careful to keep enough distance so she wouldn't feel cornered. Mia clutched his jacket tighter, still warm with his presence. "She said I couldn't stay in there," her voice trembling but resolute. "The stares, the whispers. They looked at me like an intruder and didn't deserve to stand beside you." She took a deep breath, steadying her voice. "And maybe they're right. I don't belong in your world, Ronald." Ronald stood still, his gaze fixed on her. He didn't rush to deny it or soothe her with empty reassurances. Instead, he stepped closer, his tone low and sincere. "They don't know you, Mia. They only see what they want to see. But I see you, the woman who dared to stand, to step out of the shadows, no matter how hard it was." He paused, as though weighing every word. "You don't need to belong to my world. I want you to know you're enough to belong anywhere you choose." His words fell over her like a warm breeze slipping into the cracks of her heart. Yet they frightened her too. She shook her head, retreating a step. "You don't understand. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I was enough for my family, friends, and people like Daniel. And every time I tried, I only felt smaller. I don't want to be someone's project, Ronald. Not yours, not anyone's." Ronald nodded, his eyes soft, stripped of arrogance. He said, "I don't want you to be my project," his voice low but steady. "I want you to see your worth, not through my eyes, but your own." He stepped back, sliding his hands into his pockets to give her space. "If you need time, I'll wait. But don't let those whispers define you." Mia looked at him, torn between gratitude and fear. She wanted to believe him, but doubt was rooted too deep. She turned, descending the last step, leaving Ronald beneath the lights. The cold air pressed against her skin, but she didn't feel alone this time. She felt a small flame, not from Ronald, but within herself. The days that followed carried her back into routine. The cafe became her refuge, the hum of the espresso machine, and the scent of toasted bread shielding her from the judgmental echoes of the gala. She began reclaiming parts of herself she had neglected. One evening, she pulled out an old notebook and started sketching plans for her dream bakery. Rustic wooden tables, small vases of flowers on shelves, trays of golden cornbread. She scribbled recipes, adding a dash of cinnamon to peach pie, to recreate her mother's flavor. One morning, as she wiped down the counter, a regular customer, Mrs. Rosa, who always ordered chamomile tea, smiled warmly at her. "You look different today, Mia," the older woman said gently. "There's a light in your eyes, like you're finding something." Mia blinked in surprise, then smiled. "I'm just trying to be myself," she answered, and she felt the truth in her words for the first time. She started researching baking courses at the community college. Though her work schedule was heavy, she carved out time to browse programs, dreaming of the day she could turn passion into reality. Yet, in quiet moments, Ronald's image returned his eyes, his steady voice, the way he defended her, without making her feel weak. Still, she reminded herself, she didn't need saving. She needed to carve her own path. One afternoon, after locking up the cafe, she looked up and found Ronald waiting at the corner, leaning against a sleek black car. He wore a simple shirt, no trace of gala grandeur, but carried his usual quiet confidence. "I didn't come to intrude," he said, stepping toward her. "Are you okay?" Mia folded her arms, her gaze cautious but not unkind. "I'm fine," she replied, "but I need time to figure out what I want." Ronald nodded, his expression calm. No pressure in his eyes, I understand. But if you'll let me, I want to share something. He paused, searching for the right words. I once thought I had to live by everyone's expectations, family, partners, this entire city. But I realized the only life worth living is the one that feels real. Mia studied him, catching the honesty in his tone. And do I make you feel real? She asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Ronald smiled, small but warm. You remind me that I can be myself, Mia. Not Ronald Wilson of Wilson Enterprises. Just Ronald. They stood beneath the amber sunset glow, and Mia felt a new kind of connection, one not built on rescue or grandeur, but sincerity. She wasn't ready to open her heart yet, but she was learning to face her fear for the first time, not to overcome it for someone else, but for herself. The early morning at the cafe where Mia Anderson worked followed its familiar rhythm, but today she felt a subtle shift within. The espresso machine hissed, the scent of toasted bread filled the air, and the first rays of sunlight streamed through the windows, painting streaks of light across the wooden counter. Mia wiped the counter clean, her movements quick but unhurried, as if trying to savor each moment. Since the Harbor Foundation Gala, she had resolved not to let judgmental eyes or cruel whispers define her. She wanted to rediscover herself, not through the gaze of others, but through the choices she made. She began devoting time to the things she once neglected. One evening, after a long shift, Mia sat in her small apartment and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook she once used for sketches. Its pages brimmed with ideas for her dream: bakery, rustic wooden tables, little vases of flowers on shelves, trays of fragrant pastries. She jotted down a new cornbread recipe, adding a touch of honey for sweetness, recalling afternoons spent in the kitchen with her mother. Each stroke of her pen felt like a small step toward reclaiming her faith in herself. Mia enrolled in a baking course at the nearby community college. Though her work schedule was demanding, she carved out time for Tuesday and Thursday evening classes. She learned to knead dough, control oven temperatures, and experiment with new recipes there. Once she brought in a batch of butter cookies filled with peach jam. The instructor, an older woman with a warm smile, tasted them and nodded. You have talent, Mia. These pastries tell a story, and I want to hear more. The praise made Mia's heart race, not because of the recognition, but because it felt like she was inching closer to her dream. At the cafe, Mia noticed slight shifts in how others saw her. Mrs. Rosa, the regular, who always ordered chamomile tea, once leaned over and said, "Mia, you're carrying the whole world in your smile today." Mia laughed softly, warmth spreading through her chest. "I'm just trying to find my path." "Mrs." Rosa replied, and the older woman nodded as though she understood more than words could say. On weekends, Mia started jogging along the river to clear her mind. The sound of water and sunlight glittering on its surface helped her think more clearly. During those runs, she often thought of Ronald Wilson, his steady eyes, the way he defended her without making her feel weak. Yet she reminded herself she didn't want to lean on him to feel worthy. She needed to know she could stand independently before letting anyone step into her life. One afternoon, while testing a recipe for sea salt chocolate cake in her tiny kitchen, her phone buzzed. A message from Jessica. "Are you okay? I've been worried since the gala." "Has Ronald reached out?" Mia smiled as she typed back. "I'm okay, Jess. Really. I'm learning to be myself." Jessica replied instantly with a heart emoji. "Proud of you, Mia. Don't let the world dim your light." The words warmed her, reminding her she wasn't fighting alone. Ronald didn't rush back into her life, and Mia was grateful for that. He gave her space, sending only short, thoughtful messages. "Did you try the new peach recipe yet?" Or, "Beautiful day today. Perfect for a run." His words never demanded an answer, but reminded her he was still there, waiting without pressure. She began to think perhaps he wasn't just the powerful man in a tuxedo, but someone searching for something genuine in a world of facades. One evening after class, Mia wandered into a nearby thrift shop. She found a small blue ceramic vase, perfect for the flowers she imagined, on her bakery tables. As she paid, the elderly shopkeeper smiled kindly. "You chose this because it has soul, didn't you? Old things always carry the best stories." Mia nodded, feeling he spoke of her too, a woman who once believed she wasn't enough, but was now learning to see value in her scars. Back home, she placed the vase on her table beside the sketchbook. She added a new idea to her drawings, a cozy reading corner in her bakery where customers could sip pastries with old books. The thought made her smile as if she were building her own world piece by piece. She no longer thought about the gala whispers or Daniel's piercing gaze. She thought only of who she wanted to become. One morning, as she prepared to open the cafe, Mia received a small package. Inside was a worn old cookbook filled with handwritten dessert recipes. Tucked inside was a note in Ronald's bold handwriting. "I found this in a second-hand shop. Thought you might like it. No need to reply. Keep dreaming." Mia ran her fingers over the yellowed pages. She didn't text him back, but placed the book on the shelf beside the blue vase, a reminder that she was on the right path. As the sunset painted the sky, Mia stood at her apartment window, gazing at the glittering city. She no longer felt small before it. She thought of Ronald, of the way he looked at her as if she were a story worth reading. But more than anything, she thought of herself, of the woman learning to write her own story, without rescue, without definition from anyone else. She smiled, warmth blooming inside her, knowing that though the road ahead was long, she was ready to keep walking. The sun dipped low, painting the bustling streets in shades of amber, as Mia Anderson locked the cafe door after a long day. The cool evening air carried the scent of flowers from a nearby cart, reminding her of childhood afternoons when her mother would place fresh blossoms in the kitchen to brighten the room. She stretched, her body aching with fatigue, but her mind felt light, as though each passing day brought her closer to the best version of herself. Her bakery sketchbook had grown thicker, pages filled with menu ideas and layouts. She had even started saving small tips, set aside one by one, to turn her dream into reality. As she stepped outside, her eyes caught a familiar figure. Ronald Wilson leaned casually against a sleek black car at the corner, hands in his pockets, his gaze steady and patient. He wore a deep blue shirt with rolled-up sleeves, far more approachable than the tuxedoed man from the gala. Mia stopped, crossing her arms, her expression a mix of caution and curiosity. "She said you always seem to show up at the right time," her voice teasing, but edged with surprise. Ronald smiled softly, the gesture easing the sharpness of his features. "I didn't want to intrude," he said, stepping closer. "I just thought of you, and I wanted to see how you were." The simplicity of his words carried a sincerity that made Mia's heart flutter. She tilted her head, studying him. "I'm fine, Ronald. Truly. But what about you? Doesn't someone like you have a dozen things to do?" He chuckled, the warm sound echoing lightly in the quiet street. "A dozen things, yes. But sometimes I need a reason to walk away from the desk." He gestured toward the road ahead. "Walk with me. I promise I won't keep you long." Mia hesitated, then nodded. Part of her wanted to hear more from him, to understand why he kept coming back. They strolled down the street as the lampposts flickered on, bathing the city in a gentle glow. Mia spoke of her baking class, how she had once burned a batch of chocolate cakes while distracted by a new recipe. "I thought the instructor would scold me," she said with a laugh. "But she only told me, 'Failure is the best teacher.' I'm starting to believe that." Ronald listened intently, his eyes lighting up as she spoke about her passion. "You're making me want to try your baking," he said. "Especially that sea salt chocolate cake you mentioned before." Mia smiled, warmth spreading through her. "One day, I'll let you taste it. But don't expect perfection." Ronald shook his head, his gaze steady. "Perfection isn't what I'm looking for, Mia. I prefer what's real." His words made her pause, searching his expression for the deeper meaning. They stopped at a small bridge spanning the river, where the water shimmered with reflections of the city lights. Ronald leaned against the railing, his eyes distant. He said, "I want to tell you something." His voice lower now. "My work running the company, the meetings, the contracts is like a game I can't quit. People think I have everything. But sometimes I feel trapped in a golden cage. No one really knows me. They only see the name Ronald Wilson." Mia stared at him, surprised by his candor. She had always considered him untouchable, yet now she saw a man carrying invisible scars much like hers. "So what do you do when you feel that way?" she asked gently. Ronald turned toward her, his expression softening. "I look for what feels real. Like that night at the wedding. I saw you sitting alone and talking with you." His words sent Mia's heart racing, though she kept her tone even. "I used to think you just wanted to play the knight saving the damsel," she said, half teasing, half serious. "But now I see you're searching too." Ronald laughed, though his smile carried a touch of sadness. "We could both be searching and just walking different roads." They walked on, and Mia shared her latest idea. A bakery with a small reading corner where customers could sit with a book and a cup of tea. She said, "I want it to feel like home," her voice brightening. Ronald nodded encouragement in his eyes. "I want to visit that bakery one day, and I'll order tea with your cornbread." As they neared her apartment building, Mia stopped and turned to him. "Thank you, Ronald," she said sincerely. "Thank you for not pressuring me to be someone else." He smiled, his eyes warm. "Thank you, Mia, for reminding me that I can be myself." He paused, then added with a playful glint, "And if you ever need someone to taste your baking, I'm always available." Mia laughed, feeling like a door inside her had just cracked open. "I'll remember that," she said before stepping into her building. She glanced back once, catching his gaze before disappearing inside. In her apartment, her eyes fell on the old cookbook he had sent, still resting on the shelf beside the blue vase. She flipped to a handwritten ginger cookie recipe and smiled. She wasn't ready to open her heart, but knew Ronald wasn't just a passerby. He made her want to keep moving forward, not for him, but for herself. That night, as moonlight streamed through her window, Mia lay in bed reflecting on her journey. She was no longer the girl afraid of judgmental stares. She was becoming a woman who knew what she wanted: a bakery, her own story. And whether Ronald was there or not, she knew she would continue step by step with a heart full of hope. The golden glow of sunset blanketed the city, as if painting over every dream Mia Anderson was slowly building. She stood in her small kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, as she kneaded dough for a fresh batch of ginger cookies. The sweet aroma of honey and spice filled the air, carrying her back to days when she helped her mother prepare baked goods for family gatherings. On the table lay her open sketchbook for the bakery, its pages crowded with notes and ideas, a counter lined with miniature lemon tarts, a cozy reading nook stacked with old novels, and a wooden sign carved with "Welcome to the House of Flavor." Each idea was a piece of her journey of self-discovery, where she was learning to love herself. Over the past weeks, Mia had found a new rhythm. Her baking classes at the community college had given her more than technique. They made her believe her dream was not foolish. Her instructor, Mrs. Clara, often praised her for the way she put stories into her pastries. "Your baking has a soul, Mia," Mrs. Clara said during one session after tasting cornbread infused with honey. You make it as though you're telling your own story. The words made Mia smile, as if she were reclaiming fragments of herself she once thought were lost. Ronald Wilson still lingered in her thoughts, though she tried not to let him take up too much space. His short messages. Tried the new recipe yet? Or. Beautiful day. Perfect for sketching. We're always gentle, never demanding a reply. And yet each time she read them, a quiet warmth spread through her, as though he were the only one who saw her without asking her to change. Still, Mia kept her distance, not out of fear, but because she wanted to ensure that every choice she made truly came from within. While cleaning the cafe counter after her shift, her phone buzzed one evening. A message from Ronald. There's a small art exhibition tonight. Nothing formal, like the gala, just a few paintings and some wine. Want to join me? Mia stared at the screen, her fingers hesitating above the keyboard. Part of her wanted to say yes to see another side of his world, but another part feared feeling out of place again, fearful of losing herself. She finally typed back, "I'll think about it." "Thank you," Ronald replied almost instantly. "No rush. Just be yourself, Mia." The message made her smile, though her heart raced. She locked up the cafe and walked through the lamplit streets, choosing to stroll along the river to think. The water shimmered under the moonlight, and she asked herself, could she open her heart without losing herself? Back at her apartment, Mia sat with her sketchbook, but instead of drawing, she wrote. She wrote about the days when she felt she wasn't enough, about the times she tried to change to please others. I've spent too long trying to become who I thought others wanted. She scribbled, her handwriting shaky. But now I want to be Mia the baker, the dreamer, the woman who's enough simply by being herself. She closed the book feeling like she had shed an invisible weight. The next day, Mia made her choice. She texted Ronald, "I'll go to the exhibition, but only because I want to, not because of you." He responded with a simple smiley face, and she laughed out loud. The exhibition occurred in a small gallery with white walls lined with oil paintings and tables with glasses of red wine. There were no chandeliers or judging stairs like at the gala. Ronald stood in the corner speaking with a painter, but when he saw Mia, he smiled and walked over. "You came," he said, his eyes bright. Mia wore a simple navy dress, her curls loose around her shoulders, and she felt entirely comfortable for the first time in a long while. "I came to see the art," she teased lightly, "and for the wine, too." Ronald laughed, guiding her to a vivid abstract piece. "This one reminds me of you," he said. "Chaotic, but with a clear story if you take the time to look." They moved from painting to painting, talking about art and the little things that made them feel alive. Ronald shared how he once tried painting to relax, only to end up with a mess of colors. "I don't have your talent," he admitted, his eyes glinting. Mia shook her head with a smile. "I don't have talent. I try, and sometimes that's enough." Standing before a painting of a moonlit road, Mia turned to him, her expression resolute. "Ronald, I need to say something," she began. "I used to think I had to be perfect for someone to choose me, but now I know I don't need anyone to choose me. I choose myself." She paused, taking a steady breath. "If you want to be with me, you must understand that I don't need you to make me feel enough." Ronald met her gaze without flinching. He said, "I don't want you to be anyone else." His voice low but unwavering. "I'm here because I want to know you, Mia the baker, the dreamer, the woman stronger than she realizes." He stepped closer, though he didn't touch her. "I won't promise you the world. I can only promise to stand by you if you'll let me." Mia's heart pounded, but this time it wasn't fear. She smiled a soft, confident smile. "I'll think about it." she replied, a playful note in her tone. They stood together, surrounded by art and gentle light, and Mia knew that whatever choice she made, she had already chosen herself first. That was the most crucial choice of all, and one she would never let go of. Morning light filtered through the window of Mia Anderson's small apartment, falling across the kitchen table, where she carefully decorated a tray of lemon tarts. The little pastries, their golden citrus filling, topped with a sprinkle of orange zest, resulted from hours of experimentation in her baking class. The fresh scent of citrus mingled with vanilla, turning her tiny kitchen into something that felt like a true home. Mia smiled, savoring the quiet but profound joy of seeing them finished. They weren't just desserts, they were proof of her journey from a woman once full of doubt to someone who now knew her worth. Over the past months, Mia had built a new rhythm. She still worked shifts at the cafe, but each day felt like an opportunity to learn, observe how customers enjoyed their food, and gather stories about their favorite treats. She filled her sketchbook with new ideas, buttery cookies filled with homemade strawberry jam, a pound cake with a touch of cinnamon that reminded her of family holidays. She had managed to save a modest sum, just enough to start looking into renting a small space for her future bakery. Every tip, every extra hour of study was a step closer to her dream. Ronald Wilson was still part of her life, but in a way she hadn't expected. He didn't overwhelm her with constant presence, didn't demand or intrude. Instead, he sent thoughtful messages. "What did you bake today?" Or "I saw a little flower shop. You'd love it." These gestures made Mia feel appreciated, not because she needed him, but because he chose to stay with patience and sincerity. Slowly she realized Ronald was not a man trying to save her, but one who wanted to walk beside her. While arranging pastries on a cafe shelf one afternoon, her phone buzzed. A message from Ronald. "I have a small surprise. Meet me at the Riverside Park, 6 p.m. Mia smiled, curiosity stirring. She replied, "If it's a tray of burnt cookies, I refuse to taste them." He sent back a laughing emoji, and she knew she would go. When she arrived at the park, the sunset painted the river gold, a scene straight out of a painting. Ronald stood near a wooden bench, holding a small, craft-wrapped box. In a dark blue sweater, he looked more casual than ever, yet still carried his natural confidence. "This is the surprise," Mia asked, nodding at the box, her voice playful. Ronald handed it to her, his eyes alight. "Open it." Inside lay a set of small pastry molds, delicately carved with intricate designs. "I found these at a craft fair," he explained. "You might want them for your bakery." Mia brushed her fingers over the molds, moved by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she said softly. "But you don't need to do this to impress me." Ronald chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm not trying to impress you. I want to be part of your story if you let me." He gestured to the bench. "Sit with me." They sat, and the space between them was easy and natural. Mia shared about her classes, about the time she dropped a tray of cookies, and the entire class burst into laughter. Ronald listened, encouragement in his gaze. "You make me want to open a bakery," he teased, then added more seriously, "But honestly, I admire how you chase what you want." Mia looked over the river, its shimmering surface like a mirror of her dreams. She said quietly that "I used to think I had to change to be accepted. But now, I know I'm enough as I am. I don't need anyone to make me whole." She turned to him, her eyes steady. "If I let you into my life, it'll be because I want to, not because I need to." Ronald nodded, unwavering. "I don't want you to need me, Mia," he said. "I want us to choose each other, because we see each other not who the world wants us to be." He paused, then added, "You remind me that I'm more than a CEO. I'm Ronald, The man who loves hearing you talk about baking and wants to see your bakery come alive. His words made Mia's heart race, but there was no fear this time. She smiled, confident, genuine. Then Ronald, if you want this, we can try, but only as equals. No knight, no damsel, just two people walking together. Ronald's eyes lit up as he laughed. Deal, he said, holding out his hand. Mia slipped her fingers into his warmth, flowing through the simple gesture. She knew this wasn't dependence, it was a choice. They rose, strolling along the riverside, talking about small things, favorite cake flavors, the books they wanted to read. As the moonlight shimmered on the water, Mia turned to him. Tonight I choose you, she said softly but firmly. But tomorrow, I'll still choose myself. Ronald smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. And I'll keep choosing you daily if you let me. As they walked on, their silhouettes melting into the city lights, Mia felt a new wholeness. She was no longer the girl sitting quietly at the corner table, shrinking from others' eyes. She was Mia Anderson, the woman building her dream, the woman who had learned to love herself. And beside her was Ronald, not her savior, but her companion, walking with her into a new beginning where they chose each other for who they truly were.